and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. Give me a second. Okay. I'm going to kind of dive into the election here in a little bit. Not exactly where I want to start off. But I think there's a lot of things in play right now that maybe people, I wouldn't want to say aren't aware of, but might be overlooking on purpose. But it also plays off of truth and then also plays off of emotion. But we are looking at a future that might, at the beginning, be good for some sects of society, but I think in the long run, it's going to bite everybody in the butt. But a lot of it plays off again of the emotion. I want to start off with this clip from We Are Change, and then I'll kind of get into it after that. But Trump isn't establishment per se when it comes to being bought. But he's one that he buys politicians to make a profit. And, where does he go when he takes office? Government health care, not a fan of that. He's got a lot of things that I don't agree with. For temporary sake, I would say he would probably help the economy out. It will be temporary again. It's one of those things, throw that big old boost into the economy and then, it kind of feathers off. And I just don't know if I feel safe with that guy or Hillary or Bernie or, or Ted Cruz or Rubio. I don't see what people see in Trump because I believe him to be more of a nationalist and not a freedom or liberty lover, because nationalists can attack their own people in the sake of keeping their power for national pride. You know, it's not my cup of tea, let's say. Um, but, you know, where's this stemming from? And this is stemming from people railing against the establishment. And again, this is from We Are Change. This is titled The Rise of the Anti-Establishment, Trump by Larkin Rose. And it's really interesting. It's not that long of a clip, but it's really interesting. And many people that might listen to me might know who Larkin Rose is. It's one of those things that you have to understand why people are going to Trump to try to break the establishment. But then, you know, I'll get into some other stuff after this. So I just want to get this queued up real quick. We Are Change. The Rise of the Anti-Establishment Trump by Larkin Rose.
This is Gradowski of WeAreChange.org, and with Donald Trump changing the political landscape as we're seeing it unfold right before our eyes, scaring the establishment, I kind of wanted to bring a bigger perspective into what's happening, and that's why I'm joined by the one and only Larkin Rose, leading philosopher, one of the leading thinkers behind anarchy and anarchism, and I really wanted to bring your perspective on Donald Trump because it seems like when he's speaking, sometimes he sounds like a libertarian, and then other times he sounds like Mao Zedong. So it's very confusing and perplexing, but I really wanted your take on Donald Trump and kind of the rise of Donald Trump.
Well, a lot of people might not want to hear this who imagine that he is an outside force and a you know, how many times has that happened where a tyrant comes along who pretends I'm not part of the system and I'm an outside force and all this and this and that and the other thing. He's a statist. He's obviously a statist. He's obviously an authoritarian. He's basically doing what Hitler did, saying the establishment and what we have now is horrible, put me in power and I'll fix it. And what's been particularly annoying is to see a bunch of people who say they believe in freedom falling for the lie that's been used for centuries, and it's the exact same template every single time. And the fact that even some people
Give me a second. Technical difficulties.
This July,
as we're seeing it unfold right before our eyes, scaring the establishment, I kind of wanted to bring a bigger perspective into what's happening, and that's why I'm joined by the one and only Larkin Rose, leading philosopher, one of the leading thinkers behind anarchy and anarchism, and I really wanted to bring your perspective on Donald Trump because it seems like when he's speaking, sometimes he sounds like a libertarian, and then other times he sounds like Mao Zedong. So it's very confusing and perplexing, but I really wanted your take on Donald Trump and kind of the rise of Donald Trump.
Well, a lot of people might not want to hear this who imagine that he is an outside force and a you know, how many times has that happened where a tyrant comes along who pretends I'm not part of the system and I'm an outside force and all this and that and the other thing. He's a statist. He's obviously a statist. He's obviously an authoritarian. He's basically doing what Hitler did, saying the establishment and what we have now is horrible, put me in power and I'll fix it. And what's been particularly annoying is to see a bunch of people who say they believe in freedom falling for the lie that's been used for centuries, and it's the exact same template every single time. And the fact that even some people who call themselves anarchists are going, rah, 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 this is worth going rah, rah, rah about, that they don't recognize the pattern that's happened a zillion times before, it's kind of frustrating. There is nothing in what he says that is in principle about self-ownership and non-aggression. He whines about what we currently have. And if the discussion is how government violence should be used, the answer doesn't matter, you failed. So for people to see, especially pro-freedom people, to see him as some sort of savior is just kind of depressing.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see him kind of galvanize the anti-establishment, the anti-politically correct crowd in this kind of vigor that's letting him overcome the major political parties. What do you think is a credit to why is that happening? Why is he getting such support from people who are not politically friendly? And, why do you think the political establishment is, so, afraid of him?
Well, it's a thing that's happened before in ways. Ross Perot is another example of, well, at least he isn't the same cookie-cutter politician liar, that doesn't ever say anything. At least he says something. At least he says what he believes in, and yada, yada, yada. And people don't bother to pay attention to what he's actually saying. But because he's not one of the politicians, as far as they can perceive, then he's seen as an outsider. And they imagine that means he's something different. It just means he's a different flavor of control freak. But it's, that's refreshing for somebody to find somebody who says what he actually thinks. And unfortunately, that it's sometimes that refreshingness makes people ignore what the actual message is. And they're just, well, at least he's anti-establishment. And ultimately, he's not. He would just be a different establishment. And, it's only happened about a zillion times in history where you have, Che Guevara, people still have Che shirts, and Castro, we're against the evil empire until we are the evil empire. And Donald Trump would just be the new evil empire. And so, again, to have people get all gung-ho about that as if the fact that he's a different control freak makes him good. No, it doesn't. It makes him a different control freak.
Exactly. No, definitely well put. And especially when it came to Che Guevara and Fidel Castro, they had a revolution, but it still established the same powers, the same kind of control, even more kind of just pressing down on society, murdering people, putting them in jail, which many people don't know about. Especially the people you see walking around with Che Guevara shirts on, don't really know who Che Guevara was and the criminal past he was, and just the awful things he did when he did have that power. But when it comes to the changing landscape, do you see it moving towards more freedom? Do you see it moving towards more anarchy, especially with so many people against the system, or do you see it backfiring?
Having been an anarchist for 20 years, I can say there's a massive increase in recent years. The Donald Trump phenomenon doesn't matter. In the long run, it's an absolutely irrelevant glitch, including a bunch of pro-freedom people who are going rah, rah, rah and think he matters. He doesn't matter. What matters is the underlying philosophy of people, and there are way more people understanding the concepts of self-ownership and non-aggression and things like that than there were just a few short years ago. Ultimately, that's what matters. The political process never matters in the long run. The game, who's on the throne, even empires, rising and falling, in the end, what determines it is what the people believe and what the people think. That is changing in the right direction, regardless of the stupid circus that goes on in elections and all that stupidity. In the U.S. and around the world, ultimately that isn't what matters. It's what's between the ears of 8 billion people, and that is going in the right direction.
Many people, take the responsibility off from themselves, and they think just voting once every 4 years will actually make a significant difference. It's kind of like the lazy man ways of trying to change the system, but that actually, as you said, never really accomplishes anything. But when you're talking about Donald Trump kind of fooling people and kind of bringing another establishment and changing it to a different establishment, but still being establishment, what would be kind of the answer to the anti-establishment? What would be the kind of solution? What would help us bring us towards more kind of freedom?
Well, the first solution, like I said, the solution is in people's minds. If people understand freedom, they not only do they stop participating in the system, they stop paying any attention to it. It's sort of like, okay, there's a mafia over there, and occasionally they pester us, but we're not going to get all gung-ho about the next election for Mafia Don. It really doesn't matter. That has nothing to do with the direction humanity has to go in. And the unfortunate phenomenon is that there are so many people, like I like to use the ring of power as an analogy, like I did in my talk here, and there's so many people who, if they get scared enough of something, like, oh, scary immigrants coming in or Muslims or something, they will jump for the ring of power. This guy's going to use government power for good stuff. And it always backfires, and it always turns into authoritarian disaster. But still, there can be the attitude changing underneath that. People, like, they don't have to fix government. They have to learn how to ignore it and function without even paying attention to it, which is completely, like, you'll know the political process we have the political solution when nobody pays any attention to politics, when they just completely ignore it. And ultimately, when enough people believe in freedom, you can literally ignore an empire out of existence. Yeah. Like, if everyone we ignore your laws, we ignore your taxes, we don't care what you think, we don't even pay attention. We don't even know who the president is. None of that matters to our lives. I don't care who the mafia don is. I own myself, my neighbor owns himself, and we get along like adult human beings.
Yeah. A lot of people always call for revolution, this huge change. We need to change things in like a snap of a finger. Everything needs to be different right away. Personally, I believe if there ever will be a revolution, we're just going to revolve back to the same place we were before. I think this is going to be more of kind of an evolution of people kind of stepping outside of authority, stepping outside of politics and power, establishing their own lives non-aggressively, and moving away peacefully, non-violently, away from government, which could take a while. Do you believe in that same kind of philosophy? And if so, what do you think the time frame would be of something like that happening?
Well, there's sort of two sides of it. You know, if people think we have to go do something to government, it's because they don't understand the problem. Again, the problem is in people's heads, and the solution is in people's heads. However, in the meantime, sometimes there are situations where you do have to resort to violent defense against government aggressors. But that's different than revolution. That's just, we're not going to let you attack me. But yeah, as long as people believe in government, if you knock over the current regime, they'll build a new one. And, you know, historically speaking, usually they'll build an even worse one than what they had before. But I think there's a massive amount of progress happening of people outgrowing that whole lie and realizing that that's not, you know, the way out of this is basically to build a society that doesn't care what the rulers are doing, whether you're talking about economically with Bitcoin and trading on the dark web and all that, and, you know, however many different ways you can find to live your life in a way that the politicians don't matter and have nothing to do with you. That is the road to freedom. All of the political circus is just a joke. It's just a distraction. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. And it's mattering less and less, which is why the system has to get louder and louder about, you have to vote, it's really important, blah, blah, blah. Because the last thing they don't care if people go and protest. If they see people out in front of their offices protesting, that means the people are still begging them for permission. The day the politicians are scared is the day they look out and nobody's there because nobody cares what they think. Nobody's begging for permission. Nobody's paying any attention to them. That's the beginning of the end of tyranny.
Ultimately, the responsibility is on everyone, not just voting once every 4 years, but taking full responsibility for themselves and their actions and educating themselves. Now, my last question is kind of like a bigger question. It's kind of an unfair question, to be honest. Is it possible? And if so, when do you think it could happen?
It's not just possible, it's absolutely inevitable. The lie of statism and authoritarianism is so inherently bogus that eventually there is no way we won't get to a point where everybody understands it, because the truth eventually outlives the lie. At this rate, having watched this thing for 20 years and watched the increase recently, you know, I'm not going to guess an exact year, but I think in a matter of decades, the whole world is going to look very different than what it looks like now, and there will be so many people who understand self-ownership that there will be at least large patches of the globe where nobody claims authority and nobody there recognizes an authority. And then the rest of the world will learn by example, here's what humanity is supposed to be. And it may take a long time before it's the whole world. But I think unless we kick the bucket too soon, in our lifetime, we will see large patches of what society is supposed to be. No rulers, no slaves.
Definitely looking forward to that time. Larkin, thank you so much. The link to Larkin Rose's website will be in the description below. Thank you again so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
We Are Change on YouTube. WeAreChange.org. Check them out. Subscribe. And what we're seeing from a lot of people that others, would maybe go, hey, these are libertarian-leaning people. And, even Alex Jones, maybe they know Trump more. I don't know Trump. But I'm not seeing a difference other than thwarting the elites and kind of throwing a wrench into the whole New World Order, because, again, he would be more in line to be a nationalist. But that doesn't mean he's not going to be an authoritarian. And if we go towards nationalism and we keep the authoritarian, angle to it, let's say the people go, it's doing great for our country, but then we get a national socialist into power, it's going to backfire on the people it benefited, and then it just reverses roles. And again, we have the authoritarian problem where it's able to do that. It's able to suppress a portion of the society, and that's what I'm worried about. Now, you hear people like Alex Jones, Trump talk about, breaking the elites' hold, and they believe that he will be more constitutional. And if that's true, that would be great, a great directional change from where we are. Because if we can get more freedom, put the responsibility back in people's hands, we can start a trend that will increase motivation. One, when you are freer to do things and you're not restricted, instead of spending your money on a license to do this, a permit to do that, a license to do this, a permit to do that, more people might go, hey, I'll go spend my money on this. But I think that's going to rely, again, more on the local level. And then, Larkin was talking about a lot of stuff that I've covered. And it's one of those things that at the local level, if enough change and enough local municipalities make a change towards freedom, then making it to the point where society goes, President, who needs that guy? We take care of ourselves. They're just talking heads. The other countries aren't afraid to attack us because of him. They're afraid to attack us because of us. That we're willing to defend ourselves, that we have the ability, the know-how, the intelligence. But we're not going to have the intelligence if we shelter ourselves and basically give handouts. And I'm not talking about helping someone on their feet, I'm all for that, believe me. But that doesn't mean that you give everybody free stuff as long as they're willing to not do too much. And that's honestly the way it's become. And I'm not saying everybody on welfare or everybody that might need a little help isn't legit, but I've seen the ones that aren't legit. I've seen the ones that they attempt to go out and then they cry for maybe a month about how hard it is to work. And then, they sprain their wrist and they're out of work, and then right back onto welfare. It's easier. And it surprises the hell out of me. And I'm someone that I rather work for my money. I don't like handouts at all. it kind of makes me feel bad to get handouts. I'm someone that just wants to work for what I get. And that's just not everybody. There's always going to be people out there that are only going to look for the handouts. Again, that's not everybody. Some people need help off their feet or, off the ground onto their feet. They need that, they got put in a bad position, which a lot of people do because, well, you tend to need a loan for everything. A couch, a car, a house. It's ridiculous anymore. But people get themselves in predicaments. They get a good job. They're able to get the loans and bam, they're losing their house. And that happened to a lot of people in '08. So sometimes people need help back on their feet, but we have a epidemic where it's justified to take your hard-earned money and let someone else decide where that goes to help others. And I'm someone that I'm willing to help people, but there's a lot of organizations I will not donate to. There's a lot of groups that I will not donate to. And I'm someone that, there's very few groups out there that I'll support. And I'd rather give people opportunities than just give them money and expect it to go to what it needs to go to. And by taxing and having a welfare state, they don't allow you the opportunity to choose if, the person you're giving your money to is out there actually trying or playing the, I just can't do it, I can't work. Because I personally have known people that are that way. And I don't like those people around me. Judge has got, again, a lot of stuff about Trump. Chris Christie has come out. I'm not really surprised on that one at all. Okay. Here's one that kind of goes back to it's a shot at the elites rather than a shot for liberty. Bloomberg, Chris Christie delivers major blow to party elites resisting Trump. The United Republican establishment from front against Donald Trump started to crumble in a potential profound way on Friday when New Jersey Governor Chris Christie backed the New York billionaire for president with an enthusiastic endorsement. The move combined with the endorsement of Maine Governor Paul LePage later Friday adds the establishment bona fides of two sitting U.S. governors to a devoutly outsider campaign. It also comes just days after Trump's first two congressional endorsements in Representative Chris Collins of New York and Duncan Hunter of California. In Christie, Trump also gained a powerful surrogate responsible for the lowest moment in the campaign, one of his last Republican adversaries, Mark Rubio. The New Jersey governor also opened a door for other Republican Party elites who spent recent days rushing to boost Rubio and invited them to walk through. If beating Hillary Clinton outweighed all other factors, as the New Jersey governor argued, than other objectives to Trump's campaign, such as his bombastic and um, novatous rhetoric, should take a backseat as a twice elected governor of a blue state and former chairman of the Republican Governors Association. Christie could serve as Trump's ambassador to establishment donors, lawmakers, and behind-the-scenes operators across the nation, rewriting the playbook, wasting no time in showing what he brings to the campaign. Christie seized his new role as Trump standard bearer with zeal, undermining Rubio's core pitch for his nomination, his electability, and belittling him as a performer, delivering one act after another. The single most important thing for the Republican Party is to nominate the person who gives us the best chance to defeat Hillary Clinton, Christie said at a Fort Worth news conference with Trump. I can argue that the one person Hillary and Bill Clinton do not want to see on that stage come next September is Donald Trump. They know how to run the standard political playbook against junior senators and run them around the block. They do not know the playbook with Donald Trump because he is rewriting the playbook. The Christie endorsement comes 4 days before a burst of nomination contests take place on March 1st, known as Super Tuesday. After winning 3 of the first 4 states by large margins, a string of victories next Tuesday could make Trump all but unstoppable, which is why rivals Rubio and Senator Ted Cruz of Texas aggressively attacked him in a televised debate Thursday night. Within hours of Christie's endorsement, Trump landed the backing of LePage, who praised the real estate mogul's business acumen on the Howie Carr Show, a syndicated radio show. The final frontier of resistance. Trump has shown a broad appeal within the party, as he himself explained on Friday. I won in a landslide, he said, referring to the South Carolina primary. I won evangelicals, I won military, I won the vets, I won everything. I won men, I won women, I won Hispanics, I won every single category. But the one group of Republicans who have continued to overwhelmingly oppose him are lawmakers and influential consultants. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, who helped lead the charge in '94 elections that handed the party its first major House majority in 4 decades, said it's time to rethink that. The Chris Christie endorsement of Trump is a real signal to GOP establishment that they had better begin thinking about Trump as the future, Gingrich said on Twitter, adding another posting, "This is a huge step for Trump that will have a big impact on Super Tuesday." The establishment pushes back. Meanwhile, 2 former aides to Jeb Bush, an ex-rival who waged bitter fights with Trump and Christie during the primary, fiercely criticized the governor. Like Trump, Christie is pathetic, corrupt man with tiny ego. I'm sure they bonded discussing their insecurities over a big meal, Tim Miller, Bush's former communications director, wrote on Twitter. David Cottrell, the former Jeb Bush strategist, seemed to invoke Christie's weight. For Christie, throwing his support behind Trump could be seen as payback against Rubio after a bitter primary fight. As Christie climbed in New Hampshire, the state where he put all his chips, the pro-Rubio super PAC Conservative Solution spent large amounts of money on TV ads in the Granite State attacking the governor. They left a mark, and Christie never quite recovered despite landing a devastating blow against Rubio in his final debate on the Republican race. Speaking to reporters while campaigning Friday, Rubio characterized the endorsement as an act of desperation by Trump after the debate. Chris is an articulate guy. You know, Donald probably needs a lifeline after last night, so he called in Chris Christie. I respect that. Rubio said, I have more than my fair share of endorsements. Now, it really is looking more and more like Trump will get the nomination. Not guaranteed. GOP could always play dirty tricks in the national convention, and we know that. We've said that multiple times. They play that trick all the time. They played it on Ron Paul. Pretty crappy, but if we have Donald Trump, we're just going to see how it plays out. Now, again, I see it playing out good for a lot of people in the short term, but long term, I think it's going to bite a lot of people in the butt. But, again, he believes in, government health care. And it's going to be probably the one payer system. Everybody pays in, everybody gets the same thing. And again, that leads to the sorry, I had to check something real quick. Okay. If we get to a system where we make things more national controlled, it's going to look more like a fascist socialist type thing, because it all kind of is similar. The communist, Marxist, fascist, socialist, national social, they all kind of do the same things, just for different reasons and different outcomes. And none of them really help the everyday person out. And Ron Paul had his Mythbusters today. Theft is always wrong. And it kind of touches on this. And I kind of want to get into this. Ron Paul Liberty Report, Mythbusters. Theft is always wrong.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Today, the co-host is Chris Rossini. He is also the editor of the RonPaulLibertyReport.com. Chris, welcome to the program today.
Great to be with you, Dr. Paul, for another episode of Mythbusters.
Well, there's still some myths out there that we keep working on, so what do you have for us?
Let's start off with, politicians long ago discovered that if they're able to promise free stuff to people, it gets them elected. We're seeing that again this year with Bernie Sanders, foremost Bernie Sanders. And a lot of times the supporters, we tell them, he has to basically steal from someone in order to give you something. And a lot of times the supporters, they'll justify it in their mind somehow just to make them feel better. And they'll say, he'll cut from the military or cut from wasteful spending, but that still doesn't change the dynamics of what occurs in order for him to give free stuff away. So, Dr. Paul, can you please talk about this justification process that goes on and how nothing really is free?
It's been said that a picture's worth 1,000 words, and this reminds me of the cartoon that you found and we have on our website of the individual coming up to Bernie Sanders and say, hey, I really like what you're talking about all this free stuff, because I'd like that. But where do you get the money? At the same time, Sanders is there with his hand reached around and pulling out the guy's wallet. So that tells you where it comes from. It comes from government, yeah, but where does the government get it? Yeah, this is age old, but it's the sin of the 20th century for the United States, because the entitlement system has been going on and steadily growing throughout the past 100 years, especially especially since the progressive era and from with the Depression, and the wrong things were being blamed. So the answer has always been, as it is today, more stuff free. If people can't pay for it, and debt, we don't worry about debt. We've had many generations now that have taught Keynesian economics that debt is not all that bad. It's just so the people will spend the money, even if they have instincts to say, well, I should save my money in case I have a rainy day. But that's bad. You're not supposed to think that way. So it's always the government that's going to come to the rescue. Now, you mentioned Sanders' name in the introduction, and that is true. He's so well known for all the free stuff he's going to pass out. Republicans do the same thing, but they don't brag about it. But yesterday I heard Hillary on a program, and she actually stole a lot of the words from Sanders because she's supposed to be a little bit more moderate, in passing out free stuff. But she talked about free college education. Junior college was going to be totally free. They weren't going to have any debt and could go through regular college. And so her characterization of this was just like words out of Sanders' eyes, because obviously Sanders is making points on this free stuff. But the end comes when the reality sets in that there is no free stuff. There is no such as free lunch. Sometimes people get stuff for free by manipulation. So if you look at the last 50 years, the country's been so wealthy. We've had such a strong currency. We've been able to borrow. And a lot of people, in a way, have gotten it for free, but there's always a cost. But it's never directed out proportionally to the people who had the benefits. For instance, during the housing bubble, houses were free and people were making a lot of profit speculating with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. But then the collapse comes, and so there has to be a payment. But guess what? Those people who made those huge profits, they didn't have to pay. But some of the people who were sort of innocent bystander and innocent beneficiaries, those who were getting houses, they lost their jobs and they lost their houses, and that market really hasn't recovered since. So this principle of something for free is so deceptive, and it's sort of like I think there's an instinct in everybody. Oh boy, am I going to strike it rich? Maybe I can win the lottery. And when the lottery was so high a couple of weeks ago, the cars were lined up at the places that were selling lottery tickets, always hoping to win the lottery. And I think this is it. I think people realize it might end, but they're always hopeful. And I think lawsuits are a lot like this. Well, I don't know who's guilty or what, but maybe with these advertisements on TV, let's just sue somebody and I can win the lottery. Well, winning the lottery is not going to happen eventually, because everybody's going to suffer. It's going to challenge our whole concept of liberty, and it's going to challenge the concept of what the government should be doing. But there is no such thing as a free lunch, and the sooner the people in this country wake up to it, the sooner they will come around to believing that the founders were correct, free markets are better, sound money is better, and that self-reliance and responsibility for oneself is much better than thinking for a minute that somebody in the federal government will take care of us from cradle to grave. That is an illusion, and it is a myth.
Yes, correct. And next, Dr. Paul, let's go to government and racism. Government is always preaching down to us, of course, about not paying attention to someone's skin or their gender or their age and everything. And yet it's the same government that gives us forms, and they want to know our age, our sex, our race. They want to know everything about us. It doesn't stop there, of course. And if we look at the election season, they use that information, and then they slice and dice their message to get the black vote or the Hispanic vote or this vote. And this is the same government that tells us not to pay attention to the color of skin. So can you please talk about this blatant hypocrisy?
Well, the polling and the elections are all attuned to racism, even though they would deny this. But, the census is designed, especially that extensive questionnaire on the census on what people think and believe. And usually the political party in charge has an advantage of getting that information where everybody else does not have it. But no, the racism really gets institutionalized by governments. Markets tend to want to correct it. So our government, from the very beginning, we're very much in racism and talk about two races, and slavery was going on. And even after the Civil War, which was not designed really to free the slaves as much as to destroy the Republic, but the slaves were free. But then the government moved in with Jim Crow laws, and they practiced racism all the way through. Military, even through World War II in my lifetime, they were still segregating people in the military. So, but they use it all the time. Walter Williams, a black economist that is well respected, he explains this because he was raised in the inner city of Philadelphia, but now is obviously a well-known professor and a libertarian type. And he said, why do I need a black leader? So black leaders have part of this too. Black leaders are part of the government to institutionalize these concepts. It really bothers me as a libertarian when they say, how's the black vote going to do? Well, why do they even ask that question? Even though people can come up with statistics, but I don't like it. The description of a group, and base their rights on that. Rights should be individual, so it's a distraction from individual rights, and therefore it's the inequality that we find in our court system is the fact that we don't treat everybody equally. Now, one comment and one person that has been in many ways heroic in his effort to try to change the relationship between black and white, and actually was strongly anti-war, was Martin Luther King. But he made this very strong point. He's quoted all the time that the one thing that he wanted to see his children grow up where they would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by their character. But why have we lost that? And why have the leaders of these communities only talk about this? What are you going to do for the black community? What are you going to do for the Hispanic community? I ask, what are you going to do for liberty? And why is it that everybody doesn't universally accept the principles of liberty? You would bring people more together if they understood the principles of liberty and how important the market economy is, because that's how people come together. And this idea of rights should not be divisive. But if you put rights in categories, women's rights and children's rights and minority rights and all this is very divisive and does not answer it. But quite frankly, this is not an easy argument to make, because people will twist this. They won't say, well, yeah, we can't talk about character yet until you get rid of all of this racism stuff. So I think the one thing, the principle of libertarianism would go a long way. Just think of what has happened over the years with voluntary approaches. One of the greatest integrators in our country, a long time before we had forced federal laws on what to do in schools and things, was in sports. Just look at what has happened in sports, and most of it, the Jackie Robinsons and others, they excelled in that, and yet I think of the runner under Hitler. He was great, and he was a black person, and it was in sports that you have this integration. But if we would just get out of the way of trying to think that just the use of force and putting people in categories is the answer, I think if we the government got out of the way and didn't and the media didn't always preach the gospel of groups. How did this group vote? How did that group vote? We'd get along. We'd get along a lot faster about integration.
Yes. Next, Dr. Paul, let's move to foreign policy. And in a recent Republican debate, candidates were going back and forth on 9/11 and who's to blame and who was president at the time and who didn't get bin Laden. Yet they were all, it just went over their head as to the genuine reason as to why America gets attacked. And you, Dr. Paul, were famously on stage and you had to explain it to Rudy Giuliani. So once again, Dr. Paul, please explain that maybe it's not certain individuals, but the philosophy of our foreign policy that causes all this hatred towards us.
Well, I think most people know my position on this, because our foreign policy has blowback. When we do the wrong thing to people or it's misinterpreted, people get angry and they want to come back and hurt us for this. But the real basic problem is interventionism, that we're in their face and we bomb their countries, we occupy it, and a lot of people die. But the one thing about some of the worst human beings on earth as far as initiating violence, sometimes they tell us the truth. In one sense, bin Laden probably wasn't a liar, on what he said. So when he was quizzed, even after 9/11, he gave an answer on why Al-Qaeda and why he so strongly endorsed it was the fact that that he endorsed it because of our policies, and he listed three things. The first thing was the constant bombing of Iraq, and also the troops in Saudi Arabia, and what he interpreted to be a foreign policy that was favorable and harmful to the Palestinians over Israel. And he listed these as reasons for their concern. But no, it's the policy of interventionism, and nobody wants to talk about it because both political parties endorse interventionism. They won't say, well, we can't ever look to ourselves. It's very difficult. When a person has a problem, if it's a personal problem of drinking or whatever, they don't want to say, it's my fault. I'm going to clean up my act. I'll take responsibility for this. No, it isn't that way. And a country doesn't like to do it either. The country always has to be the greatest. And some of that is good if we're truly great. But if we're truly great, we don't have to brag about it. But people do not want to say, well, some of our problems here at home, not only is it blowback from other foreign countries, but some of our problems, say, with China and Mexico, might have to do with our economic policies. It might have to do with our trade policy. It might have to do with a false economy, and it might have to do with our Federal Reserve. They don't want to say that we have responsibility. So let's blame the Chinese. Let's blame the Mexicans. Let's blame somebody else. But never and look to it, because then you're saying, oh, you're un-American. And the old saying is that if they can just say that we're being attacked, and if you're not willing to stop them from attacking, then you're unpatriotic and you're going to make the country very, very put it into grave danger. So that is what goes on. It's a political thing. One party tries to blame the other party, no matter what, but the individuals probably are less important, because I think sometimes if you really want to sort out a lot of things that are going on in foreign policy, you'd have to really have a full understanding of the CIA and the monetary system and all the other things that go on. It might be just beyond the control of one or two individuals who are supposed to be in control, but nevertheless, it's all a facade. It's a myth to think that as bad as George Bush was, he had a horrible foreign policy, made things much worse. But to say that 9 months after he was in office, that he alone was responsible for 9/11, I don't buy into that. But I believe that the neocon philosophy has been around a long time, and he was part of that, and he perpetuated the problems. But it's the philosophy of the neocons that's the real culprit when you look at the disastrous results of our foreign policy.
Yes, and let's go to the neocon counterparts in the monetary sphere. The PhD Keynesians, we'll finish up with them, Dr. Paul. They're constantly in the press trying to convince the public that gold is a barbarous relic, or some even call it a useless pile of rocks. And basically they want the public to just keep gold out of their mind so that they can continue with their central planning. Now, when they say that gold is just a bunch of useless rocks, they're actually showing a bit of ignorance on how gold became money and maintained itself as money for thousands of years, even up to today. So if you could please discuss why gold, why not another rock or precious metal, and how it came about to be money.
Well, there's two things there. One is total ignorance, because they probably never read the history of money. They probably don't have any idea about Austrian economics, so they believe the myths that they have been taught for the last 50, 60, 70 years that paper is money. Even the Federal Reserve Board chairman, they say gold is not money. Now, they may not truly believe that, but it's very important. Not only are they confused economically, so many of them, but they also know about power. If you have a gold standard and a gold coin standard where you can always call the government when they're being dishonest on whether or not this gold certificate, you can always get your gold. Every single day you could vote for the gold standard by checking it out and see if they have the gold there. They don't want that because then they don't have this power to inflate and run up debt and pyramid debt because they actually believed in that system. But the real myth is that paper is a good substitute. And once again, as you allude to, the fact that they don't understand how money came into effect. So if you go way back in history, 5,000 years ago, there was bartering going on, and it was rough. It was not smooth transition. But as time went on, people found out that you didn't have to barter just goods because it's so unequal, that if they could find a single commodity that was easily, divided and transported, that maybe they could agree and translate value of one good and another good to the value that they saw in a gold currency. So this is hard money, real money developed in the marketplace. If you just can't out of the clear blue say, oh, okay, let's print paper money. And I make fun of the idea that if a group of people get stranded on an island and they have to survive, and they say, well, the first thing we're going to do is set up a monetary board, because if we could just find some paper and let them write some numbers on there and call it money, then we're going to be a wealthy society. They don't talk about, we can ignore work and trade and all these things, that we'll just have the money. But, they say, well, there's unusual circumstances. No, they're the same real circumstances of people believing that the creation of money creates real value. And that's where it breaks down, because the only solution to too much paper money floating around the system for the last several decades has been, since the collapse in 2009, has been to print more money and make it cheap, to decide that people don't even have to pay interest on it. And lo and behold, they can't convey value to this. People aren't all of a sudden saying, well, let's trade in dollars and let's build a new industry and let's have economic growth again, because they're trusting in a system that is untrustworthy, and the whole world is based on this. So not only have they created paper money out of thin air, they've created a system called it's pyramiding of debt, or fractional reserve banking. So debt upon debt upon debt. And it makes the correction so much more difficult, because that all has to contract. So the myth is just way out of proportion to the reality that paper money created by politicians can serve as true money. The only reason that the dollar still serves as money to a large degree has been the acceptance by the world still, because at one time we were truly had the strongest currency of the world, especially after World War II. We had 700 million ounces of gold, and we were so-called backing our, we had a gold exchange standard, and people followed that. But today, that is so far gone, but the trust is still there. The only thing that's holding this myth together where paper will work is the fact that once the dollar did originate, and it originated as the Spanish mill dollar, and it was a silver dollar. But that is gone. All we're waiting for now is the liquidation of the debt and the absolute need for monetary reform. And once again, they will have to have true reform by picking a currency, whether it's in the marketplace or by government, picking a currency that has and is accepted by the people and was accepted by the marketplace, and not some concoction out of a computer or out of a printing press. And I think that time is coming, and it is not too far off. But Chris, I want to thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Paul.
Very good. And I want to thank the listening and viewing audience today for being with us. And please come back to the Liberty Report soon.
RonPaulLibertyReport.com. Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. Now, talking about gold, Dutch Bank comes out, time to buy gold. And this is out of CNBC. Gold is still expensive, but rising economic risks and market turmoil means investors should buy it for insurance, Dutch Bank said Friday. The recovery since the global and European financial crisis has put the price of gold under some pressure. The yellow metal, which some analysts view as a safe haven, or as a protection against rising inflation, typically underperforms during periods when the economy is growing or inflation is low. However, in a note issued Friday, the German bank said economic signs are pointing to gold's favor. There are rising stresses in the global financial system, in particular rising risk of a U.S. corporate default cycle and the risk of a sharp one-off renminbi devaluation due to the sharp increase in China's capital outflows. Dutch Bank added, buying some gold as insurance is warranted. However, even though gold has fallen from levels of $1,900 an ounce in 2011 to around $1,200 an ounce currently, Dutch Bank said it still looks expensive, ranking as the most expensive commodity relative to its 15-year trading history, a bit like insurance, which is often a grudge purchase for many. Some investors may balk at the current levels, it said. We would, however, argue that given the plethora of negative deposit rates globally, the holding cost of gold is now negligible in many jurisdictions, and therefore gold deserves to be trading at elevated levels versus many other assets. One of the arguments against investing in gold is that it is a zero-yielding asset, but with several central banks, including the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, Sweden's central bank, cutting interest rates into negative territory, that erodes some of the advantage of holding cash as opposed to gold, the bank said. Slower economic growth may also ease some of the risk. Gold prices will fall further, the bank said. We think the economic risks are to the downside. Gold has tended to underperform an environment on strong global growth. So while it's not an outright tailwind, slowing growth certainly eases the pressure on gold, is said in the note. Dutch Bank had previously expected gold would fall below the 1,000 mark an ounce level by the fourth quarter of this year as the U.S. Federal Reserve increased interest rates, but instead of 3 interest rate hikes this year, Dutch Bank has since said it expects the Fed to be on hold for longer, anticipating only 1 rate increase in 2016 amid a contracting in the factory sector, which threatens to spill into the services sector. It now expects that the fourth quarter of 2015 marked the lows for the gold prices. In its note Friday, the bank said it raised its forecast for the fourth quarter of this year by 26% to 1,230 an ounce. Gold for March delivery was trading at 1,238.90 an ounce at 14:30 Hong Kong time. But Dutch Bank said buyers should be patient. Investors need to be tactical as to the levels at which gold is bought, it said. The precious metal has rallied 16% against the euro, 17.5% against the US dollar, and some 24% against sterling so far this year, according to data from BNY Mellon. Even against the resurgent Japanese yen, which has climbed since the Bank of Japan shifted to a negative interest rate policy in late January, gold is up 9%, making the precious metals rally in the top percentile over the last 3 decades. Dutch Bank noted gold prices tend to be stronger during the first quarter of the year, but expects some seasonal weakness, which means there will be better buying opportunities in the second and third quarters. Indeed, Bank of America Merrill Lynch noted that buying of gold has been strong with $5.8 billion of inflows over the past 3 weeks, the highest 3-week inflow since June of 2009, which many people are also That's the end of that article, CNBC. But a lot of people have pointed to the extreme amounts of buying of gold equivalent to the market already basically taking downturn in '08 and then '09. The prices, or not the prices, but the buying of the gold had increased to a certain point that's what made prices start going crazy. And you're seeing that buying right now. They are predicting in that article, that it would drop by the fourth quarter somewhere around 1,000. But if buying keeps going up, you might not see that. And I tell people, it's not the end all solution, but it's something that is definitely a good hedge to have. You have to have multiple hedges. I'm a big prepper type person that it's not always about having a whole bunch of one thing. It's having enough of everything and being knowledgeable to procure more in a time of crisis. You can't always be prepared for everything, but you can be prepared to prepare yourself for things. If you get the drift, you don't always have to have everything. You just have to have the knowledge to be able to survive and procure things you do need. And having little hedges against, natural disasters, financial disasters, you never know what could happen. And having water, people don't usually freak out if you got water around in case of a natural disaster. But, if you have a little food too, they kind of look at you weird. Well, don't worry about it. Prepare yourself, prepare for your family. You could be in Tornado Alley or be out on the West Coast and have to worry about earthquakes. Be down and have to worry about hurricanes. Prepare yourself, do what you can, and there's a lot of information and advice out there to prepare yourself. Now, I have this article here. This was from liberty.me, tucker.liberty.me. Jeffrey Tucker, the real tragedy is that the presidency matters. And in the current landscape, you heard what Larkin Rose talked about, and it's something that I've talked about quite often. But in the current landscape we're at, does the presidency matter? Well, here's this. Freedom lovers everywhere are biting their nails this election season, wondering how the damage can be limited depending on who gains control. We could have trade wars, nationalized health care, the pillaging of Wall Street, more war in the Middle East, a VAT tax, direct surveillance of your smartphone, internment camps, mass deportations, and so on. But let's take a step back and ask whether it has to be this way. What if the power of government were so limited that it didn't matter who occupied the White House? This could be a vast improvement. Let's say that Rutherford B. Hayes, who was president from 1877 to 1881, was revealed to be be a fascist demagogue and bearded would-be dictator. Maybe the same could be said of President Chester A. Arthur, who ruled from 1881 to 1885, James Garfield, 1881, or Benjamin Harrison, 1889 to 1893. Let's say they were all crazy authoritarians who longed to rule the country as their private fiefdoms. Would it really matter? Probably not. They had no large bureaucracy to control. There was no CIA, NSA, FBI, HUD, DHS, DOL, and so on. They didn't exist, and their functions didn't exist. The Supreme Court didn't do much. There was no IRS they could lean on to persecute their enemies. Surveillance of the population wasn't yet possible. The government owned no weapons of mass destruction. There was no central bank to bail out their wars and welfare. In fact, they had to balance the budget year to year, same as states now. Because the country was on a strict gold standard, you couldn't just print money without limit. The military was tiny. There were no migration controls, taxes, or even passports. There was no federal government involvement in education, healthcare, or commerce generally. There was no antitrust regulation, no social security tax, no regulation or consumer products, no environmental land management, no price controls or labor laws that stand between workers and employers, no drug war, no decades-long process of pharmaceutical testing, no gun-free zones, no giant military contracts, and no ability to tax earnings. Most of the power presidents had amounted to steering some infrastructure contracts to their friends, and here their corruption was truly revealed. But the damage they could do was limited. Their play money came from some small tariffs. There were caretakers of a limited government that didn't intrude into any intimate aspects of life. The government they headed had strict limits on what they could do. They had no policy plans to speak of because policy, as we know it, barely existed. Leviathan, as we know it, had not been invented yet. They all came later in the 20th century. Whatever the private ambitions of Gilded Age presidents, they couldn't realize through their official capacity. Therefore, the stakes were extremely low for the country at large. This is why these men's names are barely known, and even then, hardly anyone paid much attention to the presidency as such. There are caretakers holding an honorary position of interest, not only those directly affected, to only those directly affected. As bad as the candidates are this year, as threatening as each of them are to someone's rights and liberties, none of this would be a problem if the power to act on personal ambition were not a possibility. This is what limited government means. No matter how bad or dangerous a person is who holds office, he or she has no access to tools necessary to spread damage around the population. This is a much better system. It is how power over the population is limited, not at the discretion of a good guy who wins, but rather because the institutions he or she controls cannot be used as tools of oppression. There is a sense, then, that when we talk about how grim the policies or a Trump or Sanders or Rubio or Hillary or whomever, we are not getting to the core of the problem. It should not be the case that anyone should have to worry so much about the character of the person we elect. A good system of government is one that is protected against control by wicked people. It should even be protected against good people who want to use state power to realize their ideals. Government should be a structure that is impervious to the personal ambitions of its temporary managers. Under a system, there is not much point to an active group of hysterics from the right and the left, people demanding the power be used for this group and against this group. You can scream all you want, but it has no more effect than yelling at the paint on the wall to change color. This is what it means to live under rules rather than arbitrary dictate of human ambition. Blaming those who are currently demanding crazy, scary, destructive policies misses the core point. The real blame should go to the generation who 100 years ago overthrew a system of laissez-faire and replaced it with a planning state with the power to run our lives, take our income, redistribute wealth, manage the industrial sector, enter into unlimited military conflicts, create gigantic financial bubbles, and bail out failing industries. Power once created will be used that the special interests and then the masses clamor for it to be used on their behalf is an inevitable result. With power also comes a divided population, people seething with hatred against those who stand in their way, and interest groups consumed by loathing of anyone who stands a chance of using power to their own advantage. The presence of power itself, not the people who seek to turn it into their advantage, is the source of conflict. And such a conflict threatens to destroy friendships and even the social fabric itself. The overwhelming government itself is the reason that we all can't get along. So think of it. Most of the people who created this mess are long dead, but they still rule us. The bequeath of us a monster that the present generation must contend with. Given that there is really only one responsible way forward, dismantle Leviathan before it destroys us all. And again, that was Jeffrey Tucker at liberty.me. You can find it his page at tucker.liberty.me. And, you know, these are things that I've talked about. Other, you know, freedom-loving philosophers have talked about. You know, you can go as far to say that you shouldn't have a standing government. But there's some of us that don't even go that far. We don't even go to the extent that you can't always have a standing government, which I think, yeah, that would be cool. You just don't have one. But for the sake of having some structure that has enough to satisfy the needs of people that feel you need some type of structure there, they're structure related people. That's usually, you know, what the left used to represent. They wanted that structure. It didn't really have to do all these crazy things. It just, they wanted to feel that there was a structure there. And they had it. It just, you know, it wasn't some big crazy thing. Constitutionally, you can get your way back to that. And that's what some libertarians, you know, once you go so far, you can't go back to the Constitution. Well, it's not true, because you have to get back to self. It's not going to just, you know, snap and change overnight. Something Luke brought up to Larkin Rose, and, you know, talking about this, we for a long time have said, you know, to get towards that libertarian society, a limited constitutional government could procure that, as long as it was nothing more than a, you know, headpiece, the guy that waves and, you know, represents us, kind of like people do at the Olympics. You know, it's not a position of power over the people. It has no structure to be that. And we've allowed these structures to be put in place. And they've used propaganda to get it. And a lot of it's documented. A lot of, you know, the operations that they've ran, it's been evident to a lot of people that have read these that, you know, they have succeeded. Look where we have gone, and we haven't became really a safer nation. So, you know, let's say Donald Trump, you know, is going to get the election. As someone that wants freedom, sees the Constitution as a path, hopefully he would take that document seriously when it comes to the structure of government. I don't think he will, but you know what? With this many liberty loving people that are backing him, I think that if he tries to double cross all these people that are willing to back him and make them pay for things that they don't want, go after their gun rights, I think they would cause some stir in the streets. Because basically that is why he's being voted. Not, it's a stab at the elites, but he's catered to these people. That these are things that they want. These are things that they're trying to fight to keep. Is their freedoms and their constitution and their, you know, they want limited government. And we'll just have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see if the GOP tries to play dirty tricks to keep him out, because he is an outsider of the GOP elite. They are not fans of Trump, and they probably will try to play dirty tricks. But again, you know, they're throwing their punches out there with Cruz and Rubio, which seem to have partnered up and attacked Trump pretty hard. It's hard telling. Okay. Let me bring this up here. Seems like tonight's really moving along. Sorry, occasionally been having issues with my internet. We're supposed to have a guy out. He didn't make it, but I might have a solution. I just haven't had the time to do it. I have to get into this router. Okay. Now, if this will load, I might have to close a couple of these here. See if we knocked it down. Okay. This is out of... Oh, sorry. Okay. This is out of usuncut.com. And, of course, everything wants to kind of go to hell here. People that put too many ads on your website, no offense, but the pop-up ads kind of suck. It's not even from the site I'm trying to read off of. Okay. usuncut.com, its official idiocracy writer, says His satire of a brain-dead America has become reality. Idiocracy has been a long-cherished sci-fi satire in cult circles, telling the tale of two people who wake up from a cryogenic sleep to find that the country has become a wasteland of anti-intellectualism. Now, 10 years later, the co-writer of the cult comedy classic, Ethan Cohen, thinks that the movie is satire no longer, marveling that his movie has gone from fiction, sorry guys, to nonfiction on Twitter today. Cohen used his movie to perfectly sum up our current political climate. I never expected Idiocracy to become a documentary. So, that was his tweet that he put out. Speaking with The Hill, come on, scroll down. Speaking with The Hill, he quipped that I thought the worst thing that would come was everyone wearing Crocs. Cohen's jokes come from a place of disenchanted enthusiasm. Exhaustion. Many voters are sharing in this exhaustion during an election season where a reality show host who gloated recently, I love the poorly educated, is a frontrunner for President of the United States of America. And yes, Donald Trump did say that. Quote, people will email and post stuff on my Twitter that's like, hey, you predicted it right. So that's always nice, but it's not always nice because you want the world to become a better place. Mike Judge, the other co-writer and director of the film, told The Verge in 2014, yep, we're doomed. Might as well make jokes about it. Terry Crews, the ex-football player and current actor and TV personality who played the role of the nation's outlandish leader, President Camacho, posted his own likeness on Twitter to mock the ongoing election back in January. And he posted a picture of President Camacho says, all y'all need to stop tripping, chill the F out, America. Camacho 2016. And really, that really does kind of sum it up. You know what kind of perfectly goes along with that is a lot of the comedy TV shows that have been on TV. And, you know, some of these TV shows, they're not by the youth looked at quite as much as satire is in a way of how to act. And that's getting sad when children and young adults are walking around and life to them is almost, and this ain't even trying to call out any, but this is kind of what I equate it to, is life to them is a Saturday Night Live skit. And that's not a good place to go, because that does make us look like we are starting to see idiocracy become reality. And that was usuncut.com. Now, I also have an article here out of antimedia.org, the antimedia.org. This one As usual, Facebook's newest so-called enchantment, the emoji reaction button, meant to be alternatives to the much um, maligned like option, come with a rather important catch: social engineering. This is why Facebook really wants to use its new reaction buttons. That's the title: why Facebook really wants you to use its new reaction buttons. Facebook confirmed to Mike that it will use data gathered when you use the new emojis to alter your newsfeed and learn more about what you like. Do you prefer Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump or fashion to green living? Facebook knows this about you, and it will use the information to tailor your newsfeed to things Facebook thinks you want to see, reported Mike. Though Facebook often disputes suspicion, its updates are psychosocial experiments. The platform's notorious 2014 study, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, proved users can't be confident they aren't. Facebook users become unwitting social media lab rats when data scientists manipulated the news feeds of some 700,000 people to study emotional contagion. The newest emojis in that context might immediately stoke suspicion Facebook is up to the same tiresome, creepy tricks. Its Facebook's goal is to change your behavior, Mike continued. They need to know your psychological response to photos and videos the same way to tobacco industries need to people's brain chemistry when choosing additives in cigarettes. For Facebook to compete with Snapchat and Twitter, it needs to water their algorithms with something better, and your emotions are a superfood. Considering the average attention span is now literally less than that of a goldfish, and Facebook is, after all, a business, optimists might say tailoring news feeds to users' reactions isn't ultimately so detrimental. Unfortunately, with over 1.28 billion users worldwide, Facebook's platform offers convenient mechanisms to share vital information which might otherwise remain obscured. In other words, Facebook itself isn't the only internet or interest at stake. Artists, independent media, small business owners, nonprofits, and an untold number of others rely on the social media giant's diversity of active accounts to reach people who might not visit a traditional standalone website. Pessimists could argue that social engineering or not, the user agreements account holders signed to join Facebook meant Mark Zuckerberg has free reign to indulge his every whim. Like the new Facebook emojis, other social media platforms perform similarly, aggregating so-called improvements all the time. Twitter's switch from favorites to likes immediately comes to mind. Though Mike reported it had received clarification saying Facebook's new emojis still count in newsfeed algorithms as likes. That could change in the future. This time, instead of becoming an begrudging and resentful guinea pig, it's simple to opt out of quasi-Orwellian Facebook social engineering. Don't love, haha, wow, sad, or angry any post. Just stick to the boring like until Facebook manages to implement what most people wanted all along, a dislike option. And isn't that what everyone's called for? A dislike. Not a sad, not a happy, not a in love. No. I like, I dislike. something that I don't want things like this on my newsfeed. Oh, they kind of do have things like that already. So you don't even have to dislike. You can just say hide from newsfeed, and it'll start hiding things like that. And then, what about people like me? And I've kind of got to a point a long time ago that I really don't do the whole like button too much anymore. Because then it does kind of will manipulate your news feed. I found that it's less manipulated when I don't use it. Excuse me. Okay. Want to get to this last clip here. If I can get it up here. Okay. Last clip here for the night. Okay, give me a second. Okay. We are change, how society controls you. And this is, sorry. This is from, again, We Are Change, How Society Controls You. So here we go.
Mexico, and I'm joined by the one and only Sasha Daygame. Now, you might be asking yourself, what is a pickup artist doing on the YouTube channel? What is someone who is viewed by society as one of the worst, socially unacceptable, rash, rude people doing on this YouTube channel called We Are Change? Well, first of all, I just met Sasha, and he's been showing me his boot camp. He's been giving a lot of amazing speeches here, and he really gave me a different perspective of pickup that I never saw before. But just in your own words, Sasha, just tell us about some of the amazing work that you've been doing.
Ooh, that's a pretty big build up there. Well, yeah, when people say pickup artist, yeah, it does have a shitty connotation, and I got into this because I used to have no confidence whatsoever. I had a really brutal childhood, a lot of abuse, no father figure, so I really had to figure stuff out on my own. For me, it was just a tough process. And I discovered this group of guys who wanted to get good with women, and I joined them, and I learned a lot of amazing stuff. But it's led to a lot of development, self-development. I've gone on a massive journey of discovering myself, dealing with my pain, loving myself, done a bunch of like ayahuasca, San Pedro, gone into meditation, just all this stuff, this tremendous amount of stuff I've gone through. And the irony is guys come to me because they're like, I want to hook up with chicks. But then what they really discover is they want to be loved. They want to connect with somebody. They want to go much deeper. So for me, pickup is a way to kind of almost trick people in, like, oh, you want to get some pussy? All right, here, I got something for you. And then they get that. They get over their fears. They get over their ego. And then later they go, oh, okay, it's not about the girls. It's about something much deeper. So it's kind of a lie when if we call me a pickup artist, I'm lying. But what I do fundamentally, I kill fear. I kill guys' fear. That's basically this is funny because you're there and the thing's there. Which one am I looking at? Am I over here? Doesn't matter. All right. It's funny. I've never been interviewed by a man with a big stick before. I feel like you could just whack me. Hey, fuck, that's the wrong answer. Fuck face. Why are you hitting me in the face? So the biggest challenge, I think, and this is a real serious thing in our society, it's very frustrating. If you can't have companionship, you can't find love, you can't get sex, people snap. You in America, how many people go postal and shoot people? It happens all the time. And I really believe if you're happy with yourself enough to go and connect with another human being and you find somebody and you have a relationship, and you get love in your life, you're not going to go take a fucking gun and go postal. Yeah. So it's so important to be able to connect with other human beings. It's so important. And, you know, the thing I rant about the most really is breaking free of the control mechanisms in our society. And they are so deep when it comes to our belief as men in ourselves and our ability to go out there and be men. Yeah. Just be men. Just the simplest thing is coming up to a beautiful woman and saying, "You're gorgeous. I want to meet you." How many guys do you know that can walk up on the street, just they see a beautiful girl, they can just walk up to her and look at her in the eyes, human being to human being, and go, "Wow, you're amazing. I want to meet you. I want to connect with you." Less than 1%. Yep. Less than 1% of men. What has happened to men that we can't do that? Yep. Something has been taken away from us. And I don't think it's a fluke. I don't think it's like a weird coincidence. No, I think this is programmed. You look at the men, look at the men that were around 70 years ago, even in the 50s in the world. They were men. They, from what I can tell from the books and the TV, everything looking back then, guys like, I don't even want to go into examples. Men were men. Yeah. Okay, and now they're not. They are less than men. And it's programmed into us. Look at religion. We're just thinking about sex is dirty. You're not supposed to masturbate. You're dirty. You're not supposed to hit on girls. You can lose your job for hitting on a girl. Are you serious? We're all here because people are fucking. People have fucked. That's why we're here right now. If people haven't been fucking, he wouldn't be interviewing any. It would just be blank space here and an iPhone just like pointing at the ceiling. That's all this would be, right? And so they inflict shame and guilt about the most basic stuff. It's unbelievable. It's like this control mechanism, and it's killing us. It's literally killing us. And the thing is, if you can't overcome your fear as a man, I mean, look. But by the way, what's normal? Just think for what's normal. Your buddy says to you, "Hey, let's go out there and meet some chicks." What are you expected to do? Go to a club, spend a bunch of money for what? For some fancy clothes? To get into some fancy club? You want to buy a table for $5K so you can get some chicks over there? We're taught. You want to get some women? Spend money. That's the answer to anything. Spend money. Spend money. You want happiness? Spend money. Look at the ads. Huh? Look at all the ads with a dude, with some beautiful girl standing next to a Porsche. Yeah, get the car, you're going to get the girl. Check out this watch, you're going to get the girl. The whole society, we're just programmed to spend money for anything. Yep. Are you kidding me? And so what are men doing? They're either trying to make lots and lots. They're throwing their lives away trying to make money on things they don't even love. Not pursuing their passion, pursuing money so they can get the girl one day. It's a fucking scam. It's a scam.
You literally just answered all the questions I was going to ask you in just that one little rant, and I was hoping for more of a discussion. But yet again, the most fascinating thing is there is a lot of downward pressure by whoever you may call the elites. I mean, there's a lot of mixed messages when it comes to just sex everywhere, but there's also kind of societal pressure saying, no, you can't have this. You can't get this unless you look perfect, unless you're handsome, unless you're beautiful, unless you have all this money. Then you could do that. But if a random guy who maybe be balding or has a big nose or whoever they may be, or maybe not as rich as somebody else, if he tries to have fun, it's kind of even people at the club sit back and they kind of make fun of him. And they're kind of like, who are you? How dare you? But I think one thing that's really interesting with what you're teaching and just some of the pickup artists, I mean, obviously there's a lot of bad apples too, but some of the pickup artists, it's really working on being intrinsic. It's really working on being authentic, the truest version of yourself, so you can actually go out there in society, be functional, have connections, be a happy human being, productive human being, which, again, I personally believe is like meant to be kept away from us, because when we're miserable, then we're willing to work that 9-to-5 job in that office. We're willing to only have 2 weeks of vacation and not do anything else. But more personally, I wanted to ask you, what do you think are the biggest pressures when it comes to the downward push of the suppression of real love, of real happiness? What are the factors in our daily lives that affect us most?
Great question. I think it's that whole belief that, we're not supposed to think that we're enough. If you really look at the messages, all of them. Supposed to think that we're enough. If you really look at the messages, all of them, the news, the media, the movies, everything, we're not supposed to think that we're enough. We're supposed to watch movies and see other people being enough, seeing other people do amazing things, other people doing the impossible. and that's it. Look at sports. Huh? People sit around and spend money and waste their lives watching other people be awesome at something. But it never occurs to them, wait a second, I could be awesome at something too. They're training us to just be sheep, spend money, and watch other people live their passion. Yeah. We would think about that as a society. We would rather sit around and watch other people be great than even try and pursue greatness ourselves. And it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that in societies before. Everybody would strive for greatness in some area. Now, nope. The whole system is a joke. Even these basic ideas that we have. Marriage. Oh, it's normal. Marry someone, have some kids, pump out a couple more taxpayers, right? Save up money for when? For when you're 65 and you're too old to do anything because you haven't actually been told how to live healthy and take care of your body. You eat shit. You're going to have health problems your entire life anyway. By the time you're 65, you're screwed, and the government's going to steal the money anyway. And people are excited to get the house with the mortgage and have the kids and put money away for a future that doesn't exist. It's insane. It's totally insane. Yeah.
And it's also financially beneficial because when large corporations make you sad, when they make you emotionally hurt, when they get rid of gap within themselves, that pain, that hurt, and they think that, you know, having whatever it is, a new car or a new flat screen TV will fill that void when it never does. Okay, he's asking for the mic.
So this is the, you got to resolve. I could sum it all up in a the drugs that are brutal, cigarettes kill you while making corporations that feed off murder richer. That's fine. Alcohol destroys you from the inside. Totally fine. Use it. We'll tax it. Totally fine. Dulls you, makes you stupid. But every substance that can open up chakra, which is your connection to spirit, anything that can actually connect you to source or make you think outside the box, MDMA, something that'll make you actually love, San Pedro, ayahuasca, they're banning even that stuff. Anything that can make you realize you are the creator, you are a piece of the eternal universe, God, whatever you want to call it, that we are all that. No. You don't get a piece of that. Have your booze. Have your fucking Hollywood movie, okay? You're not supposed to see the truth. You're not supposed to find out what's really going on ever. Drink your drink, do your smoke, spend your money. That's all you're supposed to do, and keep your fucking mouth shut and don't ask questions. That's your role. And you have to choose. Are you going to live your role, or are you going to do what you were born to do, which is to excel at life, to become your best fucking self and enjoy life and help other people? Okay? It's your choice.
And understand nothing is virtually impossible, and you have the choice. You know, even in one other point I wanted to bring up, just to correlate everything. In McDonald's, when there's like not enough people inside of McDonald's, they actually play sad music. Why? When they play sad music, you stuff your face in more and you eat more useless crap because it's all psychology. It all works. They even have particular paint that changes your brain psychology. They use your own emotions against you. And one thing I enjoy about all the work you're doing, it's like you're deprogramming a lot of the limiting beliefs, a lot of the kind of self-doubt, the talk of like, oh, I'm not good enough to find a partner that's right for me. I'm not good enough to try to have a connection, a real connection, which again, is not just like picking up girls and just boning girls. No, it's a lot more deeper than that, because like the ultimate connection, like we were just hearing at your conference, is about being truly honest with your partner. It's about just exposing yourself fully and understanding that if it's your connection, what? And it's such deeper and it's such a bigger understanding. And I think maybe that's why the pickup artist community has, you know, such a bad rap as well, because they're seeing a lot of the potential. And also, there's a lot of jerks out there too who bastardize as well. But I just want to thank you for, you know, doing everything that you're doing. We spent a lot of time. Conversations got deep. I mean, we talked about a lot of deep conversations. Really enjoy Sasha Day Game. The link to your website and your YouTube will be in the description below. I'm going to leave you on a rant just by yourself. Just go. You're amazing.
I did have one more important thing I wanted to say, and it just slipped my mind, and I'm hoping it'll come back right now. That is probably the key here, is that you cannot let take away your ability to love yourself. It lowers your frequency. It makes you paranoid. It makes you close your heart, and your life will be shit. Because if you're living in that state, you will attract that state to you. You create your reality. That is the truth. That's the only truth that matters. Okay? So trust your instincts and surround yourself by people who are at the love frequency. Read books about it, meditate, hang around amazing people. Just do love. It's all about the love. Focus on the love, and that is how we transform the planet and make it the fucking paradise that we all deserve. That's it.
We are change. We are change on YouTube. We are change.org. And, you know, I don't believe in a paradise, but I believe in a lot freer state that you have a lot more ability to perform at your ability rather than the abilities that they prescribe to you. I have one last article I want to cover real quick. This one from DenverCBSLocal.com or Denver.cbslocal.com. Bill would require reporting of non-vaccinated children. A bill introduced in the State House would require the reporting of non-vaccinated students to Colorado Department of Health and Environment. Currently, those records are kept with the school. What this bill is not about is requiring more students to get vaccinations. It's about who will keep charge of the records, said Representative Dan Pobbin, a Democrat representing Denver. A hearing at the state capitol on Thursday was packed with parents who opposed the bill. Christine Carter has 4 children and has had them vaccinated. I have the freedom to report what I'm going to do with my children or not, said Carter. I don't think it's the government's business. The proposal opened an emotional debate about Colorado's low vaccination rates. Colorado is one of 20 states that allows parents to claim any kind of personal opposition to required immunizations, and vaccine rates for some diseases are among the nation's lowest. Colorado passed a bill 2 years ago to have schools report vaccination rates, but for 1 in 5 Colorado kindergartners, there was no immunization. Information on record for 2014-2015 school year. Some of those who are opposed to vaccinations are fearful of the state obtaining the names of those who have opted out for fear it's a step towards tracking them down. Pam Long brought her son Josh to the hearing. She says he has a vaccine-induced brain injury. House Bill 1164 is designed to circumvent the law protecting privacy and bully people into every vaccine on the market, said Long. After Thursday's marathon hearing, the bill passed committee 7-6. And we know from legislation like this being passed in other places, then you tend to have the state's, Board of Health or, someone showing up at your door going, your child hasn't had their vaccinations, basically trying to convince them that they are being forced to get them vaccinated when really they can't force them to, and it's really dirty tricks that they play. And this really is something that would lead to things like that. And in these other states, it tends to be the Democrats that play that card too. Pretty funny because a lot of Democrats or elitist supporters of Democrats tend to have a eugenics background or come from a eugenics background. One of that might, play into that. It's one of those things, though. You look at it, and that if in the past this is what it's done and led to the bullying into vaccinations. It's one of those things that you pretty much understand that it'll eventually lead to that. Maybe when it first gets passed, it won't, but eventually it will. They'll have the records. They'll be able to do it. So, and we see this big uprising opposition to it. It still passes 7-6. Narrow margin, but 7-6. And then, here's one last article. Apple's lawyer, if we lose, it will lead to a police state. This one out of Philadelphia.cbslocal.com. And Apple's attorney painted a scary picture if Apple loses its fight with the FBI. In an interview with CNN Money's Lori Siegel on Friday, Ted Olson warned of a government with limitless powers that could listen to your conversations. Olson said the demands would mount, quote, lose. You can imagine every different law enforcement official telling Apple we want a new product to get into something. Olson said even a state judge could order Apple to build something. There's no stopping point that would lead to a police state. You can read the rest of the article again, Philadelphia.cbslocal.com. But we're already getting there. We do have things like the Stingray, but these demands, he's right to say, demanding a company to build something that doesn't currently exist is a new precedent. And I think that I've even kind of missed that point of the whole thing. It's not even the helping them get in the phone. They said, hey, look, you've been in the phone. You changed the passcode and disabled us to access the information that was on the phone that we already had access to until you changed the passcode and changed the permission after it was already in your hands. So you've already been in the phone. We've done all we can. Demanding them to build something that doesn't exist, create something that doesn't exist. New precedent that definitely could go beyond, what we already know of. Things like the Stingrays. Just look at, trying to go get on a plane, standing in those lines or all that, and then, being groped. So, we look at all this and none of it's making us safer. If anything, it's taking our safety away from us because it's abridging our freedom. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Don't forget to go to ucy.tv and click that support UCY tab at the top and donate when you can to help keep this network operational. We do have operating costs, and we're lucky to have a network that gives us this platform to broadcast all this information out to you. And don't forget to check out antityrannynews.com/metal and go to Magi Metals and check out all the great things, gold and silver, great prices, great different, coins that you won't find other places. And ucy.tv at the bottom, click the Amazon tab, and you can shop Amazon and see all the great prepping gear that they got and stay prepared. And UCY gets a little kickback from that. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will catch you next week. Stay tuned here on ucy.tv for all the great broadcasts coming up after this.